Imagine yourself in Paris, 1793, and the city no longer feels like a capital. It feels like a pressure cooker. The air is thick with smoke, wet stone, and rumors. Everywhere you look, there are posters on the walls, soldiers on street corners, and faces that avoid eye contact for long periods. Because in this new France, a poorly chosen phrase can turn you into a suspect. You wake up to bells and drums. By noon, you hear the sound that makes conversations stop mid-word. A cart rolling over cobblestones, escorted by men with muskets. Someone is being taken to the Revolutionary Tribunal. You don't know their crime. You don't even know if there was a crime, and that's the point. The revolution promised liberty. It promised equality. It promised fraternity. But now, the Republic is at war. The streets are hungry, and fear is becoming law. The guillotine stands like a clock you can't ignore, and every day it ticks again. Here's the question that haunted an entire generation. How did a movement born from hope turn into a machine of executions, and why did it start devouring its own leaders? Stay with me, because once the terror begins, it doesn't just punish enemies, it creates them. And by the time you realize where the line is, you're already standing on the wrong side of it. On July 14th, 1789, the mighty Bastille in Paris, a hated prison and a living symbol of royal power, fell to a revolutionary crowd. Ironically, only 7 prisoners were inside, and the fortress was already slated for demolition. But none of that mattered. Its capture lit the fuse of the French Revolution. Within a few short years, Louis XVI and his wife Marie Antoinette would be arrested, tried, and marched toward the guillotine. France declared itself a republic, promising a new world built on liberty, equality, fraternity, words that would later echo through constitutions, protests, and revolutions everywhere. And yet, almost immediately, something darker followed. In the turbulence and fear of a collapsing old order, France slid into a period that still chills the modern imagination: the Reign of Terror. From 1793 to 1794, revolutionary justice became a machine powered by ideology, paranoia, and war. The guillotine, celebrated as swift and equal, devoured thousands, including former heroes of the revolution itself. What began as a promise to defend freedom spiraled into a cycle of accusation, punishment, and blood. The terror wasn't only mass execution. It was a complete political transformation under emergency conditions, a nation trying to reinvent itself while surrounded by enemies and torn apart from within. Led by the Committee of Public Safety and figures like Maximilien Robespierre, the revolution's radical wing argued that survival required ruthlessness. In their eyes, mercy was weakness. Suspicion became a civic duty, and fear became a method of government. To understand how France reached that point, you have to zoom out. By the late 18th century, France was burning with inequality and debt. The monarchy had spent heavily on wars and court life, while tax burdens fell hardest on common people. The Enlightenment stirred new expectations that rights should be universal, that power should be accountable, and those ideas collided with the privileges of aristocrats, clergy, and an absolute king. The revolution's early phase exploded into view with the Bastille, but that was only the beginning. Panic and rumors swept the countryside in what became known as the Great Fear. Peasants, terrified of plots and famine, rose up, attacked symbols of feudal authority, and forced a collapse of old arrangements. In Paris, pressure intensified through repeated insurrections. By 1792, the monarchy had been toppled, and France was trying to write a new political order in the middle of a storm. Key milestones pushed the revolution toward radicalization. After the Bastille came the abolition of feudal privileges and the Declaration of the Rights of Man and of the Citizen, a foundational statement of new political ideals. But as the months passed, factions fought over what the revolution should be. Moderates and radicals accused each other of betrayal, and outside France, monarchies watched the upheaval with alarm. Then came the turning point, the execution of King Louis XVI on January 21st, 1793. It was meant to prove that France had severed ties with the old regime forever. Instead, it triggered shockwaves. Royalists saw martyrdom. European powers saw a threat. War expanded, and France faced the war of the First Coalition, foreign armies and internal enemies at the same time. Under that pressure, the National Convention created the Committee of Public Safety in April 1793. At first, it was a wartime emergency body, a shield against invasion and counter-revolution. But in practice, it became something much more: the concentrated executive power of the revolution. Under leaders like Robespierre, it claimed extraordinary authority to save the Republic, and that mission became the justification for purges, repression, and executions. The committee's most famous faces included Robespierre and Georges Danton, two men who would eventually be enemies. Robespierre, a lawyer shaped by Enlightenment political theory, believed a republic required civic virtue, but he also believed virtue without force was powerless. In his logic, terror was not the opposite of virtue, it was its weapon. Danton, once a driving force of the revolution, initially supported strong action too, but he leaned toward compromise and restraint as violence escalated. That difference would cost him his life. The committee's power was immense. Influence over the military, foreign policy, and the courts. The ability to issue decrees and supervise local officials. It acted as the revolution's central nervous system, designed to respond instantly to threats. But centralization came with a price, because when fear becomes policy, the definition of enemy can expand without limit. The terror accelerated dramatically with the Law of Suspects, passed on September 17, 1793. The law made suspicion enough to ruin you. Its standards were vague and elastic, not just active opponents, but anyone considered indifferent, insufficiently enthusiastic, or socially tainted by association. Former nobles, émigré families, clergy, political rivals, and ordinary citizens caught in personal vendettas could be denounced and arrested with little evidence. This destroyed social trust. A neighbor's accusation could become a death sentence. Revolutionary tribunals were established to process cases quickly, and legal protections collapsed. Trials became performances, often rushed and predetermined. The guillotine became the symbol of efficient justice, but efficiency in this context meant speed, volume, and inevitability. Officially, historians often define the Reign of Terror as roughly 10 months, September 1793 to July 1794, but the road to mass political killing began earlier. In 1792, France went to war with Austria and Prussia. Their leaders issued threats that only fueled panic in Paris. As foreign armies advanced, the capital erupted in a brutal prelude, the September massacres. Between September 2nd and 6th, 1792, crowds and militias killed around 1,600 prisoners, roughly half of Paris's prison population, out of fear they would be freed to join invading forces. Similar killings occurred in other towns. It was a warning of what could happen when a revolution convinces itself that violence is a form of self-defense. By late 1793, France was resisting invasion, but at enormous cost. Conscription expanded, death tolls climbed, and inside France, the revolution faced fierce internal resistance, the most infamous being the Vendée uprising. This counter-revolutionary revolt, driven by anger over conscription, religious persecution, and local grievances, triggered a devastating crackdown. Republican forces carried out mass executions and systematic destruction. In places like Nantes, killings by shooting and drowning became notorious. In the countryside, entire communities were crushed, leaving a legacy still debated by historians. The terror's net widened relentlessly. Nobles, clergy, political opponents, and ordinary people were swept in. Accusations became weapons. At the same time, the revolution launched a major de-Christianization campaign. Churches were closed or repurposed. Religious symbols were destroyed, and clergy were persecuted or forced to renounce their roles. For supporters, it was a break with the old regime. For millions of believers, it felt like an assault on identity, and it deepened resistance. High-profile executions turned terror into theater. Marie Antoinette, once the glittering symbol of royal excess, faced a sensational trial and was executed on October 16, 1793. Her death sent a message. No one from the old world was untouchable, but it also disturbed many who had supported the revolution's early ideals. Then the revolution began devouring its own. Georges Danton, once a titan of revolutionary politics, increasingly criticized the growing brutality. That made him dangerous. Accused of corruption and indulgence, he was executed on April 5, 1794. With Danton gone, the internal purges reached a terrifying clarity. Disagreement itself could become treason. The machinery of execution accelerated further with measures like the Law of 22 Prairial, which stripped away defenses and expanded the range of political crimes, making conviction easier and faster. The result was the Great Terror, a peak period of intensified executions in Paris, as fear consumed even members of the revolutionary government. Counting the dead is difficult because terror did not always wear a legal uniform. Thousands were executed by revolutionary courts. Many more died in prisons, in civil conflict, or in extrajudicial violence across the provinces. Numbers vary in records and interpretations, but the scale is undeniable. France was experiencing state-directed violence against its own people on a level that shocked contemporaries and still haunts modern history. And then, just as the terror seemed unstoppable, it snapped back on its architects. The end came through the Thermidorian reaction. By July 1794, fear had reached the very heart of the National Convention. Deputies believed they could be next. Robespierre, trying to defend his policies, delivered a speech that accused unnamed conspirators, and instead of rallying support, it triggered panic. If the names were not spoken, anyone could imagine their own. On July 27, 1794, Robespierre was arrested. His supporters tried to regroup at the Hôtel de Ville, attempting a last-minute counter-move. But forces loyal to the convention stormed the building. In the chaos, Robespierre was found with his jaw shattered, whether from a failed suicide attempt or gunfire remains debated. The next day, July 28th, 1794, Robespierre and key allies were guillotined. The terror, in effect, ended when its chief symbol was executed by the very logic he had helped normalize. After Thermidor, the political atmosphere shifted fast. Prisoners held under terror policies were released. The Committee of Public Safety was weakened and reorganized. Extreme laws were repealed, tribunals reformed, and the government moved toward a more moderate stance, though France's instability was far from over. The revolution would continue to evolve, eventually producing new forms of authoritarian power and, ultimately, Napoleon. The legacy of the Reign of Terror is not just a list of executions. It left deep psychological scars and social mistrust, neighbors denouncing neighbors, families shattered, communities traumatized. Economically, life and commerce were disrupted by fear, requisitions, price controls, and constant instability. Politically, it created a lasting warning. When a revolution equates dissent with treason, it can turn liberation into repression. And historically, the terror became a reference point for later movements. Across centuries, regimes and revolutionaries have argued explicitly or implicitly that violence can be justified to defend an ideal society. From purges to ideological campaigns, the French experience became both a model and a cautionary tale. Power can be seized in the name of hope, but it can also be maintained through fear. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like and subscribe, and leave your idea in the comments about what the next video topic should be. I'm Jhon, remembering the past to understand the future. See you in the next era.